Okay, yesterday we talked about the Hittites, and today we're moving on to the Phoenicians. Remember the big thing. Listen, this is the big thing about the Hittites right here. Allie, definitely on the test. Ready?
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
This right here. Whoops. I don't have a very steady hand, do I?
No, you don't.
The Hittites put iron to use with their weaponry. What a great advantage that gave them to defeat the Amorites from the place we know as Babylon. The Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were located on the eastern edge of the Mediterranean. See this right here? That would be east, right? North, south, east, west. Does anybody still have trouble with that? Does anybody do this? I'm facing north now. Never eat soggy waffles. Rose, what do you have?
That's what I do.
Oh, okay. For me, it was always, if I'm facing north, east, I don't know why. It reminds me of being on the right. But especially because the left is 4 letters, and the second letter is E, and the last letter is T, and so is west. I know that's weird. Left is west. Can't follow that. The eastern coast of the Mediterranean, present-day Lebanon. I said Lebanon. You thought? I was just checking. What's one of the things that Lebanon's really known for? That's why I say Lebanon. You say a type of tree.
What?
No, seriously. It's in the Bible. Cedars of Lebanon. Huge, massive cedars. Okay. The Phoenicians, that's where they live. Present-day Lebanon. They are known for their great wealth. They discovered this purple dye from some shellfish. Aren't mollusks shellfish? You guys, who's the science people in here? Isn't a snail a mollusk?
Yes. Yeah.
Shellfish. They were able to extract this purple dye. Now listen, just like we talked about we haven't really talked about much about the explorers yet, have we? But as we study history and we study how people started to trade with each other and explore other lands, the big allure, the big motivation for that is that you'd be able to make money, right? You'd be able to grow your riches because you have someone that no one else has. The Phoenicians had this purple dye. Imagine if you were living in a colorless world and you were able to get your hands on this clothing, this material that was purple. That would be worth a lot of money. So they became very wealthy. And there you go, the great cedars of Lebanon. And in bold print, if you've ever thought, I wonder who came up with the first alphabet. It was indeed the Phoenicians. So not cuneiform, an actual alphabet. Not the one we use today, of course, but an alphabet. Their capital or most prominent city, the great city of Tyre, biblical city, thrived even after the demise of Phoenicia. So when the Phoenicians are conquered, that great city of Tyre that they built is going to continue to thrive. Okay, in this vast... What? I went too fast? Oh! Sorry. Ever heard of Jezebel?
Yeah.
great city of Tyre thrived after the Phoenicians were taken down, but then their demise came with the introduction of the Vedas. Now we're ready? The Arameans. We're up to 1000 BC. Yay. 1,000 years and 4 days. Notice that we go so fast the first part of world history because the further back in history you go, the less information you have, right? Because it's been so long ago. So the closer we get to present day, there'll be more information because we can find it. And these people, the Arameans, are descendants of Shem. Who's Shem?
One of the sons I know, but I don't.
One of the sons of Noah?
Yeah, him.
And they become known as Syrians. Have you ever heard of the country called Syria? And now you know where the Syrians came from. They were a civilization that grew in this area 1000 BC, known as Arameans. Syria, I think, is a little bit east of the map. The capital or thriving city, the center of trade in Syria, was called Damascus. That name of that city should ring a bell. Not because you might live near there. Between Salem and Alliance, a little town called Damascus. But you remember from the Bible because Paul, on the road to Damascus, where he has an encounter with Christ, or the encounter with Christ, the Syrians seem to be in constant struggle and battle with the Israelites. The Arameans, known as the Syrians, end up being defeated by the Assyrians. And we just covered 270 years. Now we're up to 732 BC. Fascinating. Did you get that, Rachel?
Yeah. Long time ago.
Ah!
Pick it up.
We're going back in time because now we're talking about a new group of people. We're talking about Father Abraham. Did you know he had many sons? Did you? I'm one of them. Are you?
Sing that song and travel 500 times.
So let's just...
No.
Did you say don't?
That song was stuck in my head forever. I know, me too. Stop. Let's just face the no. I don't know. It's gonna be stuck there. I tell you that.
Well, if you ever wondered, when was it the story of Abraham took place? And how he was willing to sacrifice his son Isaac. So if you're good at math, you know that that was about 4,100, almost 4,200 years ago, right?
Sure.
When did the Israelites leave bondage in Egypt? That was about 1400 BC. 1446, to be as exact as we think we can be. And from the Hebrews we get, following Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that took us into Egypt. Remember, the story of these three patriarchs takes us into the time of bondage, the 400 years they spent in Egypt as slaves. Abraham had Isaac. Who do you have before Isaac? Abraham, according to the covenant with God between Abraham and Sarah, or for Abraham and Sarah, they were going to have a promised son, and from that son there was going to be a great nation made. And Abraham and Sarah got impatient. I don't know why. I mean, maybe when you're 100, 90, something, you get impatient. Okay, how's this going to happen? Well, anyway, Abraham failed and had a son. What was that son's name? Had a son with one of the maidservants. Ishmael. You ever heard that name? So then Ishmael is born. He's actually the firstborn of Abraham. That causes a problem for today's history. Because Ishmael has to be sent away. Once Isaac's born, who is the promised son, because the promise was made to Abraham and Sarah. Staying with me here, right? Well, about 2.3 billion people in the world profess their belief in Christ. Almost as many people profess Islam. And if you trace Islam back to its roots, you get Ishmael, who had to be sent away because you had this conflict. The promised son, Isaac, was born eventually to Sarah. But then you have this problem. There's this older son, Ishmael. In those days, who gets the birthright? Right? Remember that birthright blessing? It was the oldest son. I mean, that kind of thinking still filters down to today, right? A lot of times in families, like when the parents making out the will, who's going to be the person who's going to take care of things, they first look to the oldest son. Sorry, ladies, that's just like a tradition. It's probably not as much as it was in the past, but so there's a problem here. Because if Abraham has an older son in the household, there's going to be conflict as they become adults. So you have to send Ishmael away. And you follow the lineage, and you get to the nation of Islam. So now here we are, almost 4,000 years, 3,500 years later, 4,000 years later, dealing with that conflict. Today, like right now, in Kabul. Right now, we're dealing with it in Afghanistan. You've heard of Kabul in Afghanistan? No?
Yes, I've heard of it.
Okay, if Whiting's 5 cents, what is sassy?
60 to 50.
$20 for Rachel.
It would be 21, but you're breaking.
That's all the time to be a millionaire. Yeah, except I don't pay him. Watch that in the day. Kind of.
What you have to understand is Rachel has known me so long that she sees me more familial. You know what I'm saying? So she thinks sometimes she can talk to me like Zoe talks to her mom. sassy. So he would never do that. Would she? Maybe I should ask her. Anyway, you know how sometimes you might get sassy at home? Anybody? This applies to no one in here?
No, that's me.
Anyway, but Rachel will not do that anymore.
Lauren, raise your hand.
So you go from Moses to Joshua to Judges to Samuel to Saul to David to Solomon, right? Israel had as their leaders. This is the leadership lineage of Israel. Moses leads them out of Egypt to the promised land, but not into the promised land, right? Remember that? Did Moses go into the promised land? You know, the Bible story is Moses leads them to the promised land. Why did he lead them to it and not into it? Anybody remember?
No. Not really.
Yeah.
He couldn't go in.
Why?
Didn't he make water out of a rock or something like that?
And what God told him to do?
I don't know. That's
Speak
about
to the rock. And what did he do? Yeah. Yeah, use the staff. Rod. Seems like such a man. He wasn't allowed to do that. Obedience is number one with God. Then you got Joshua, who becomes the military and front man for Israel when they go into the promised land and have to battle all of the enemies that they're going to come across. Then you got the period of Judges where, remember that time where God would hear their cries. He would send them a deliverer because they would be enslaved by their enemies. Then they would go through a period of being ruled by a deliverer, and then they would fall right back into sin, and then they would be oppressed again, and into slavery, and it just kept happening over and over for about 1,000 years. Can you name a judge? I mean, most of you can't remember all the judges, but you remember the big ones, like who was the real strong guy because of his hair? Samson. Only 4 of you had to be in 5th grade. Who was the left-handed man? The left-handed man, it was important that we knew he was left-handed because he reached with his left hand and got his dagger out of his right thigh and plunged it into the belly. You don't remember this in 5th grade?
Oh, I remember.
Of King Eglon?
Yes.
You can't remember that? Ehud.
Lamb talked about last year.
Did he?
Yeah, did he?
Where he plunged it into the King Eglon and the fat oozed over the handle. You don't remember that story?
Okay.
Anyway, that's one of the judges. Or, ladies, one of the judges is Deborah. And that story is that she becomes the leader, the wise judge of the Israelites. And she's got this sidekick named Barak. And not Obama. But the funny part of that story is, like, he's supposed to be the military commander and she's the wise judge. And they're supposed to go into battle. And he goes, I'm not more if you don't come with me. I don't know. That's just funny to me. Like, he refused to go into battle without her. And then part of that story is there's this woman named Jael, Jael. And I'm not trying to be gory, or am I? Besides Ehud plunging the dagger into King Eglon, you have the story of Jael, who, because of the lack of fortitude from Barak, that now a woman was going to get the credit for taking down, his name just, remember I said about names? His name just escaped me. And Jael gets this guy while he's sleeping. He drives a tent peg right to his tent.
I thought.
So then a woman got credit for taking that guy down because of Barak.
Oh.
I mean Barak, the guy with
I was gonna.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I thought it was a woman. So
Yeah, Jael, Jael. And then Samuel, who is the bridge. Samuel's kind of known as the last judge, prophet. He was like the bridge from the time of Judges to the period of
Solomon.
Kings.
Oh.
Saul, David, Solomon. Little refresher in your Bible history as we go through this section of world history. Okay, the Assyrians, I'm telling you. I was just talking pretty gory with Ehud, the left-handed man, into the belly of King Eglon, and jail with the tent peg. That is nothing compared to the ruthless, awful, you talk about terrorism. The Assyrians, throughout history, to this day, are known as probably the most brutal, ruthless people in the history of the world.
Oh.
I've sat through a seminar where they went through all the disgusting things that the Assyrians would do to the people that they defeat. I mean, if you can think of some kind of torture, they probably did. They did, through their ruthlessness, become the largest empire prior to 550 BC. They covered from Egypt, where the laser pointer is, up into Mesopotamia. So from Egypt up through Mesopotamia, the Assyrians went and dominated that whole area ruthlessly. Like if you were an archaeologist in that area and you were uncovering some things, you're like, whoa, what happened here? Your first thought would be, must have been the Assyrians. They look really bad. Fierce, terrorized those they conquered, known for their extreme cruelty. Or if you were traveling through the area, I don't know, I'm just throwing something out there. You walk through this valley or this area and you notice all these skulls on top of stakes or something. Just awful. The Assyrian Empire. Remember Sargon of Kish way back when? Welcome, Sargon II. Biblical history goes hand in hand, of course, with secular history because it's true. So when we read about, as Isaiah prophesied, the Assyrians getting defeated by Jerusalem, we see that play out when the leader of the Assyrians named Sennacherib down goes Sennacherib, the hands of the Israelites. Hezekiah. Famously, Hezekiah's prayer. Listen, the Assyrians are brutal. They're fierce. They're almost undefeatable. It would be impossible for the Israelites to defeat the Assyrians. It would be like Cheney against St. Ignatius. No, worse than that. It would be like Letonia against Cheney. If Cheney, since Drew's in here, we'll use Cheney. If Cheney played Letonia, they could pretty much score on every play. They literally, probably, if they wanted to, score every offensive snap. That's not true. Letonia would have no chance. The Israelites would have no chance. But God, hello? Hey, look at that. Look at that, it says right there. Look at that. Look. See that? What's that phrase say? But God. The Israelites would have no chance. Go ahead. But God. And Hezekiah's prayer, famously, after Hezekiah's prayer, 185,000 Assyrians laid dead at the hands of the Israelites. How? Impossible. Plutonium can't be chained. Or to make it maybe more to something you would know, it'd be like Steelers beating the Browns this year. What? You still don't understand?
No.
How about the Jets beating the Chiefs?
Because I was joking about Steelers and Browns, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a Browns fan, but I know they can lose to the Steelers. Hope they don't.
Browns play the Chiefs.
Then there's the Bengals. I don't know. I guess that's good.
Chiefs like
Tomorrow we start with the Chaldeans. Chaldeans.
Browns should be pretty Browns should be wrestling team.
$20. Your $20 is coming out.
Silly cow.
I would